We talk a lot about fighting climate change with things like solar panels and electric cars. But what if the real war isn't just about carbon? What if it's about confusion? Today, we're going to dive into a new global strategy that's targeting a threat designed to undermine all of our climate efforts from the inside out.
Just think about that for a second. What if the most dangerous kind of pollution isn't what's in our atmosphere, but what's flooding our information feeds? This is the central question behind a huge international effort, one that argues we literally can't protect the planet if we can't protect the truth about what's happening to it.
So this really lays it all out. We're facing two crises, and they're happening at the exact same time. Over on the left, you've got the physical stuff we see all the time, the rising temperatures, the wild weather. But on the right, there's this parallel crisis of information. See, rising disinformation isn't just background noise. It actively erodes public trust, making it almost impossible to respond to the physical threat. They're really two sides of the same coin.
And that, right there, is the new front line. It's not a battle against storms anymore. It's a battle against deliberate, weaponized falsehoods. The whole goal is to make sure that the decisions we make as a society are based on reality, not on some made-up fiction designed to confuse us.
This brings us to this really key idea: climate information integrity. Now, it sounds a little academic, I know, but the concept is actually super simple. You can't solve a problem if you're stuck in an endless argument about whether the problem even exists, right? This principle says we need to start treating trustworthy information as an essential public good, just like clean air or clean water, because without it, taking any real action is basically impossible.
So this whole thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's really the latest step in a process that's been going on for years. Think about it. Right after the Paris Agreement set these big global climate goals, disinformation campaigns just kicked into high gear to try and undermine them. That led to broader things like the UN's Global Digital Compact, and now it's all leading to this, the Belém Declaration, which is a super targeted response to this information war.
Okay, so to really understand what's happening here, we've got to look at the players involved. Because you've got folks who are pushing for real solutions, and then you've got those who are actively making the problem worse. It's a pretty complex landscape with a lot of different actors who have very, very different goals.
And here's a little breakdown of who's who. In one corner, you've got your problem solvers, countries like Brazil and France, UN bodies, media, academics. In the other corner, you have the problem makers. And that's not just the people actively creating disinformation, but, and this is key, it's also the digital platforms whose very architecture can make that junk go viral. And who's caught in the middle? Well, the victims. That's all of us, the general public. But it's especially the climate scientists and journalists who get personally attacked, and it's developing nations that have the fewest resources to fight back against the lies.
So how exactly do these problem makers do it? It's really important to get this. Their goal isn't always to convince you of a specific lie. A lot of the time, it's just to create enough doubt, enough chaos, to cause total paralysis so nothing gets done. They use social media algorithms to their advantage, they launch nasty personal attacks to try and discredit the experts, and ultimately, they try to get people to lose faith in science itself.
Okay, so that's the problem. And it is a massive, complicated one. But there is a coordinated plan to fight back. So let's dive into the strategy behind the Belém Declaration. This is the global battle plan for getting our facts straight.
The core mission here is really ambitious, but it's also very direct. Restore the integrity of our climate information ecosystem. And that phrase, coordinated global effort, is everything. This isn't about just one country passing a law here, or one company changing a policy there. It recognizes that disinformation is a borderless problem, so the solution has to be a united global front.
And the plan really boils down to 4 key actions. First, creating new legal frameworks to protect information. Second, and this is a huge one, holding digital platforms accountable. That means demanding transparency and giving researchers access to their data so we can actually see what's happening under the hood. Third, building a healthier media landscape by making advertising way more transparent. And finally, number 4, empowering all of us, the public, through education, giving everyone the tools to spot this stuff for ourselves.
This quote right here really gets to the absolute heart of the whole thing. It reframes climate information not as just another opinion, but as essential public infrastructure. You know, like a bridge or a highway, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be protected, and it needs to be accessible to everyone for society to actually work the way it's supposed to.
Now, of course, a plan this big, this ambitious, it doesn't happen with some controversy. It brings up some really profound questions about control, about speech, about power. So let's take a look at the future of this fight and the pretty intense debates it's already sparking.
And this brings us right to the central debate. On the one hand, you have supporters who see this as an absolutely vital tool to protect our democracy and to finally get some climate action based on actual facts. But on the other hand, you have critics who are worried about a slippery slope. Could this lead to censorship? Could it be used to silence people who have legitimate disagreements? Both sides are wrestling with some really fundamental values here, and there are no easy answers.
So, for a minute, let's just imagine this whole plan succeeds. What does that world actually look like? Well, it would mean a totally transformed information landscape, one that's driven by facts instead of lies. It would set brand new rules for tech platforms. And maybe most importantly, it could create a blueprint for fighting this information in other critical areas too, like public health.
But at the end of the day, it all comes back to this one fundamental challenge. How do we, as a global society, defend ourselves from really dangerous misinformation without giving up one of our most essential rights, the freedom to speak, to question, and to disagree? That is the question, and there's no simple fix.
And that leaves us with this final massive question. In this incredibly high-stakes fight for our planet, the Belém Declaration is forcing us all to ask, who gets to decide what's true? And how can we possibly make sure that power is used wisely? It's a question we are all going to have to answer, together.